This podcast is brought to you by Ranch Vision, the software ranchers use to boost profits and make better decisions.
Hi, I'm Dr. Rich Brazil. I am the founder of Ranch Vision. This program was designed for producers like you. It's a unique, one-of-a-kind, forward-looking software program that enables you to see the results of your management decisions months and years into the future, from your herd numbers to your replacement costs, break-even values, enterprise efficiency, your profit and loss, your cash flow, and so much more. With this program, you can move forward with confidence into the future. Ranch Vision isn't a historical record-keeping program like all the other programs you might have seen. It looks forward. It is a very challenging, very competitive industry, and every ranch business is unique, has different variables, different opportunities, different constraints. Ranch Vision was designed to take uncertainty out of your future, to enable you to plan to profit. Please go to our website to learn more, www.ranchvision.io. Grazing livestock and just grazing animals in general are a significant part of the planet. That really is the planet.
The average age of the farmer in America is 58 years old. That is not sustainable.
We've been hit with water curtailments. We've been hit with low prices by the conditions, by the rain, by the lamb crop, by the calf crop.
I heard a Native American gentleman say, wilderness, that's an invention of the white man, because we took care of this land.
Sometimes fighting doesn't mean shouting and screaming and pounding your fist. Sometimes it's just putting your boots on and being there for work the next day.
It is, are the American people fit to govern themselves, to rule themselves, to control themselves? I believe they are. My opponents do not. I believe in the right of the people.
There are cowboys still around. You just probably don't see them because we're working all the time.
I'm Keely Brazil Cavallo, and this is America on One.
Welcome back to Unone. I am Keely Brazil Cabello. I'm here today again with my dad, Dr. Rich Brazil. He's a large animal veterinarian in Northern California and the founder of Ranch Vision. Also have Grace, one of my sisters. Grace is a wildlife biologist. She works at Ranch Vision, and she is a beginning rancher herself. So thank you guys for joining me.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Keely.
It's the family reunion here. Okay, so we wanted to talk. This is just a quick podcast. I've been out. This is the first podcast I've recorded in a few months since I had my baby, and I'm excited to kind of get back into recording. Thank you guys for all your messages and the time we've been gone and for your patience. There's been a lot of news in the cattle industry since we last recorded. Dr. Brazil's been to the White House. Actually, Grace was with him for a really exciting initiative on farmer and rancher freedom with Ag Secretary Brooke Rollins. I've been invited a couple times, but I had other things going on. I've never been invited to the White House before. I get invited twice in my little maternity leave. So
you get to hold that over Cade's head for the rest of his life.
Exactly. Do you know what I did for you? It's perfect. It's great ammo. But anyways, one of the biggest pieces of news that kind of came out, or at least one of the things that's caused a lot of buzz that I've seen, is some comments made by Health and Human Services Secretary RFK Jr., Robert F. Kennedy Jr., back in February. He talked about the need to grow the American cattle herd and to retain heifers. Have you guys heard a lot about this?
Yes, yeah. It's gotten out there a little bit.
Do any of your producers, when you're out working, have any of them talked to you about this, or any of the ranchers that you work with at Ranch Vision?
Yeah, a couple have. Basically, a couple different statements. One is, easier said than done. It's not necessarily easy to grow your herd, and it has to make economic sense. And then how do you do that? So those are challenging questions. And then, of course, once the herd grows, then prices will go back down. And, did you want to grow your herd? The cattle industry has a cycle. It goes up, it goes down. And many producers, often they're older, they've been through this cycle a number of times. They've been burnt in the past. So, once burnt, twice shy type of thing. But also, again, it is complicated as to how you actually go about growing your herd, and does it make economic sense? So those kind of questions are challenging to answer because ranch businesses are complicated.
Yeah, I kind of figured that'd be some of the feedback you'd be getting. Like, of course, easy to say, grow your herd. There's a lot that goes into it. So that's kind of why we wanted to talk about it today. Before we get any farther, let me just play these comments. Let's hear what RFK Jr. said.
Begging you to increase the size of the herds. We had 132 million head in 1972. We have 92 million today. And a lot of producers are now, because of fluctuations in the markets and uncertainty, slaughtering the breeding cows. And I'd ask you to stop doing that. And we need a lot of beef, and we want to make it here in America. We don't want to be importing it from other countries.
So I can understand what he's trying to say, which is we want a bigger beef herd in the US, because I think this comment he made was in context of some changes they're rolling out at HHS. They're now encouraging people to eat more protein. They basically inverted the food pyramid, put protein at the top, vegetables and protein, and all these good things that we're remembering again are good for you and are actually
Imagine that
important.
instead of
Yeah, right.
cereal and oatmeal.
Exactly. I know it is wild that we've known for a long time your diet shouldn't be made of empty carbs, but of course the government took a long time to catch up and reflect that. So now, the empty carbs that we used to have as the base of the pyramid, that's just at the little tip of the pyramid. You shouldn't have that many empty carbs in your day. You should focus on whole foods and real foods, and beef is one of those. So of course we want to grow the cattle herd in the US, and I'm sure you guys can both appreciate that sentiment.
Yeah, definitely. I remember having a nutrition class at UC Davis probably 5 years ago or something. And our professor was younger and kind of more with the health trends of like eat more protein. And she wasn't really recommending that you eat a lot of carbs. But then by the time we got to the part of the class where I was going over the food pyramid, and it was basically against what she had been saying. And she's like, yeah, this is what the government says, so this is still true. But it was just so juxtaposed to what was even natural and coming at that time. So long overdue.
Yeah, no kidding. Wow, that's funny that she couldn't quite bring herself to say the government does not know what it's talking about.
Exactly, yeah,
Maybe.
she's like, "We still have to listen to this," but there was an undertone of, "This is probably not what I would recommend."
Yeah, and I haven't heard a lot of pushback even from people who are pretty opposed to a lot of what RFK Jr. and Brooke Rollins and the rest of the administration might be doing on this specific action of updating our dietary guidelines.
Right, it's so
So
common sense. If you wanna be
exactly.
healthy or lose weight, you don't just go out and eat a bunch of bread. You need to eat more protein and
And to do
Exactly.
that, if there is a change in eating habits, then we need a larger beef industry. And I think that's what he's saying, because either it has to be domestically grown or it has to be imported. So I think there's an opportunity. They're helping create an opportunity. This is a great time to be in the beef industry. So there's a lot going for it. Prices are very high. Inventory is down. So it does make a lot of sense, and it's a great thing to strive for. But there are a lot of different issues, right? A lot of the country's been afflicted by drought, and that's had a significant impact on grazing lands in different areas. Certain costs, fuel costs, with Biden, fuel costs were pretty high for a while. They've been beginning to come down, but also now the Iran war. So those are considerations. It takes time to build the herd. Heifers have to go through a developmental process. It's going to take a couple years between the birth of a heifer calf and her producing, a calf, at best, 2 years at best. So there's a lot of different challenges about how to get into it.
Like with anything in agriculture, but especially with livestock, it's one thing to say we need to grow this sector of our economy, but you can't just buy more. You can't just up the inventory by purchasing more inventory. You have to wait for their live animals. You have to wait for them to mature. So it's a process. It's going to take years. What are this is going to be my next question. You kind of already touched on it, but what are some of the reasons why the cattle herd is at its lowest point in the United States since 1951, a 75-year low? We've heard drought, economic conditions. Are there other things going on that you know of?
Well, I think the industry being targeted by government for a long time, that's been difficult to deal with. I mean, up until Trump's election, cattle were destroying the planet. They were the cause of climate change, methane, and all these things. It's just a fabricated argument, but they were under the gun where ranchers were looking at a potential carbon tax. They're worried about mandatory identification for all cattle, and then that just kind of opens the door for government intervention and a carbon tax. The typical rancher is older. It's challenging to get into the industry. There's a lot of reasons why people have kind of gotten worn down a little bit, beaten down by cost, beaten down by being the target of negative sentiment. And ranching is just challenging anyway. So there's enough challenges between droughts and floods and, price drops and things like that.
I think there was a really important point that you said there, just the amount of regulation coming down. And it wasn't that long ago that beef was the enemy in the mainstream media, responsible for global warming, and that narrative has only recently started to shift. So that, I'm sure, has played a part as well.
And how confident can ranchers be that with the next election that might not, flip back
Exactly.
again?
Yeah, the AOC Bernie ticket doesn't look too hopeful
Yeah.
for the beef industry.
Yeah.
And the only reason that things are changing is because of consumer demand. It's not that the government is leading on this. I think consumers are leading on this because we, like Grace, like you just said, we've known for a long time that the dietary guidelines are ridiculous. We have not listened to them. The food pyramid's been a joke for a long time. So it's because we've bucked the government advice. That's why we're seeing this change. Beef demand is up 9% over the last 10 years. So in spite of the herd shrinking, in spite of all of the attacks that you're describing, people still want beef because we know it's healthy, it's delicious. And in the United States, it's probably the most humanely raised meat source that we have. I don't know if that's a hot take, Dad. If you disagree with that, you're on these ranches day in, day out. What would
Yeah.
you say about how beef is produced in the US?
Yeah. Beef cattle have a pretty good life. Free health care, pastures to graze. The breeding herd spends almost the entirety of their lives out in extensive rangeland pastures where any of us would just love to go to have a picnic or whatever. It's just beautiful places. Many, many places are just extraordinarily beautiful. They're just out there producing calves, continuing that cycle. A lot of cattle, because of taste preferences, a lot of cattle are finished on grain, and that gets a bad rap. And a lot of people, like, we talk about in California, driving down Interstate 5, see Harris Ranch, you can smell it about a half hour before you get there because there's hundreds of thousands of animals there. And so that's what they think of the beef industry. A lot of people who just simply drive past that, but that's just a very small proportion of the time. That's a finishing operation. Those heifers and steers are finished for 100 to 120 days perhaps. It's kind of like a 3-month banquet, 3 or 4 month banquet with their friends, being fed great feed. But it's just a small proportion of their life. And so all in all,
Yeah.
it's pretty good.
So grass-finished beef is something that you as a consumer can choose to buy. Grace has raised grass-finished beef. So you can do that if you want to buy beef that lived its whole life on grass, but you don't have to feel bad about getting grain-finished beef if that's what you prefer. Do you agree, Grace?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, like Dad said, most of their life is out on pasture, regardless of if you get grain finished or grass finished. And the consumer preference is for grain finished. If you were to do a blind taste test, that's going to be the favorite every time. So it just tastes better. The fat is more subtle. You don't get that kind of gamey taste. So it's probably going to stay more popular.
Oh, the beef you raised, that was pretty good. That grass-finished
Well, that was
meat
nice
I had at your
because
place.
it was so small scale. So they were able to be pasture and I was grading them at the same time. So they were never put in a feedlot or anything, which is a huge benefit of buying local too. Because if you know your rancher down the street, they could probably do the same thing basically.
That's exactly what I was just going to say. Yet another reason, know your rancher, buy local. You can know exactly what its life was like. You can feel really good about that, and you can support ranchers in your community and keep them going. Which, like you're saying, Dad is tough right now. The generation, like Grace's generation, they have a long road to walk if they want to make it in this industry. Land is really, really expensive. If you don't inherit land, it's tough. It's really hard. I hear from people every day who want to get into ranching or farming. They're interested in the agriculture industry, and it's just a very high barrier to entry. Have you seen
Yeah.
that change? You've been a vet for 40 years. What are you seeing?
Well, that is true, but I do think there are opportunities also, and it's not maybe as easy at one time at a certain era to purchase that land or homestead a large area. But, you can still lease ground. There's a lot of people that have great, grassland, rangeland that they don't really want to deal with it themselves. So you can still acquire leases and graze it and be profitable. So that's another opportunity that's out there. You might not own all that land, but you get to use it, and you get to benefit and profit from it. So there's opportunities, but I think, like always, you need to be creative. You need to think outside the box. You need to find solutions and maybe not just do what the rest of the crowd does all the time.
Yeah. One of the benefits we have today is social media. You can market direct beefs, sales on social media. That's not something that people could do in the past. Also, Ranch Vision software, new tools that help. So maybe we'll just talk really quickly about Ranch Vision. I want to do a future episode where we kind of dive into what the program does. This is our day job, all three of us. We live and breathe this program every single day. We work with producers all across the world, but especially the United States and Canada, to help them improve profit on their operations, improve their margins, find ways to grow. It's a really powerful tool. How can you use Ranch Vision? And maybe we'll just sort of give some big picture commentary on following RFK's advice and retaining more of your breeding herd if you want to do that. If you're a rancher and you're looking at, okay, how would this be profitable for me? Dr. Zill, can you just walk through a few ways that you can look at whether or not this would work for your operation, how you should think about this? And maybe for folks who aren't in ranching, this would be interesting just to know that these are the kind of decisions that the people who grow your beef in the United States have to make when they follow advice like RFK's advice, or when they consider what to do with their breeding herd, when they run their ranch. These are the types of decisions they're making.
Yeah. Complicated thing. And, I think a lot of people don't really appreciate how difficult the ranching industry is. When you're looking at the population dynamics of animals changing from year to year, going through a developmental process from a calf to a replacement heifer to a first calf heifer, second calf heifer, mature cow, the time it takes to get that done, the losses along the way, either death loss or infertility loss or other problems that they have to be called out, the changes over time from inflation, interest rates, things like that. It's really difficult to see the ranch picture moving forward. And that's what you have to do. The question that a producer has to answer is, what should I do now? What makes the most sense for me to do right now? And so that's what Ranch Vision is about. It allows you to see the future. It allows you to see the results of your management decisions without having to live through them. And that's really key. There are other software programs that have their purpose, record keeping systems, but all of that looks back. It tells you what happened in the past, which is fine. But what you really need to know is, what do I do now? Because the whole picture's changed, and every ranch business is unique. They tend to be also an accumulation of different profit centers, different little what are called enterprises, certain areas of the ranch that are somewhat independent of other aspects of the ranch. And you need to be able to analyze those independently. Which ones are making money and which ones aren't? In my unique situation, which is different than the guy across the road, the guy across the state, or anywhere else. And so that's what Ranch Vision does. It kind of shows you that. And so when you're looking at a question like you brought up, herd growth, how do I grow my herd? Is it profitable or not? The first question is, well, do I have sufficient grass? Right? If you don't have the grass, you're not going to be able to grow unless you acquire that grass. So if I have the grass, then I can proceed and say, okay, I'm under carrying capacity. I'm under, what I could be carrying. How much can I grow? And then what's the best way to do that? And you can either look at growing rapidly all at once by purchasing breeding animals to get up to speed, to take advantage of current market prices, or you could look at growing gradually. And if you look at growing gradually, there's basically two different ways you can do that. Either keeping more replacement heifers, your weaned calves that you could be selling. You could keep those and put them in that chain of developing ultimately into a breeding cow. Or you could purchase those. You could purchase them from someone else, a certain number per year. And looking at all these different questions in a producer's unique environment is really challenging, but Ranch Vision allows you to do that and kind of see that and then play with it and say, well, what if I did that instead? And what if I did this instead? And to then make a plan to, be most profitable if what you say is true.
That's a really good synopsis. And I'm going to share a video. I'll post it with this episode so you can kind of see what Dr. Brazil is talking about in the program if you want to. Whether you are a rancher or producer, I think that's just interesting. I think what you just said, grass is your major unit as a rancher. That kind of just struck me again. I mean, I've heard you say that many times. It's true. Ranchers are essentially grass farmers. But if you're not a rancher and you've heard this kind of tired trope that producers don't care about the land or they abuse the land, they exist because of grass. Ranchers, their major unit is grass. That's what they're growing. That's what they turn into profit through cattle, but grass is where it begins and ends. So they are the ultimate caretakers of our grasslands because their livelihood relies on it. So I just thought that was interesting for folks who maybe this is all new to them. Maybe they've never thought about the beef chain in this way. Maybe this is kind of all a new way of thinking about how beef gets to their plate. But that is something that you can feel really good about, knowing that ranchers are financially incentivized to take amazing care of our grasslands because that's what they need to be successful.
Yeah, that's so true, Keely. That is the primary resource, right? And they first have to develop the resource, and even begins before that because the soil's involved as well, right? So soil management and trying to have healthier soils and to have more productive grasslands, so that then those cows can consume that, and the rumen bacteria, can convert that grass, something we can't digest, into something that the cows can assimilate and grow on. So it really is bringing together a lot of different systems to make it all work. And if you're not cognizant of those individual parts, beginning with soils and grasses, then you're not going to be a good rancher. You're not going to be able to thrive in this business. So ranchers, they have to be good stewards.
Right. Grace, you went to school for wildlife biology. What can you kind of tell me your thoughts on ranching and how that crosses over with wildlife and soil health?
Yeah, at school, a lot of my classmates and teachers went to this idea of we just kind of need to restore it to the way it was before man messed it up. And we went over, classes of all these invasive species that the first settlers brought to America, and how they've, ruined the coastlines at Point Reyes and Bodega Bay, and all these different things. Where my background and my experience in my back of my head, I'm just thinking how the ranches and every ranch that I've been to is so much more biodiverse than the park that I can walk to, on my campus or whatever. There's just such a misconnection there, that people that are just so disconnected with where their food comes from and what ranching actually is. And they just see it as humans being this harmful effect on nature, when, like Dr. Brazil said many times, a cow is nature. We are part of nature. So, and I just think that goes back to that worldview, thinking that we just came onto the scene recently, and that everything's been at play for millions of years, getting along swimmingly without us. And then we showed up and all these terrible things started happening. And as a Christian, that's just so different from what I believe to be true, which is that we were made with nature, on day 6. So there was very little time without us, and we were made to steward it and actually caretake it. And that's the role that God put us here to do. So to think that we can just hands off and it's going to be better without us is just so foolish.
Yeah, completely. We're supposed to be stewards and gardeners. I love how you said that. So when RFK says he wants more cattle, that means more grassland, because you cannot have a larger herd in the United States without grass to sustain them. And we're losing our grasslands. We're losing our ranchers. The average age of a rancher today in the United States, I believe, is 60. So we need to start telling this story again and helping people get connected to their food and understand where it comes from. And like you're saying, Grace, know that when you're raising beef, you're actually protecting wildlife habitat and you're protecting, soil health and plant biodiversity, because when you raise beef, you're financially incentivizing an industry and you're keeping an industry alive that must protect grassland in large, uninterrupted quantities in order to exist. So it's really such a positive story. And it would take a massive psyop, not only to try to convince the country that beef is bad for you, which we've already started to reject intuitively, but also that beef is bad for the planet. And that's kind of the other half of what we're seeing now is people returning to, I don't know if I believe that. Dad, you've always said when you see a cow grazing on grass, people say that's killing the planet. That is the planet. It's like saying that fish are bad for the ocean. I've heard you say this a million times. Now I'm starting to see that all over the internet. I guess some of those
Yeah,
viral clips of yours are getting picked up, but that's great. That's a good thing. Let them rip you off.
yeah,
We need that message out there.
yeah. No, grazing animals are a very, necessary component to most extensive grasslands. And, you know, uh, I've seen ranches that have gone out of grazing for whatever reason. And you can just see the change year by year as they they lose the plant diversity. They become more brushy. They become fire risks. Um, it's not healthy. And so, yeah, livestock management is an important part. Like Grace said, it's ultimately an anti-human agenda. These people see that man is the problem, and if man were to go away, we would be back in the Garden of Eden, and the unicorns and rainbows and everything would be perfect. But that's really not true, and it is a clash of worldviews ultimately.
Yeah. Yeah, anti-human because they're anti-God. That's what's going on there. Man is made in God's image. Which kind of brings me to you both going to Washington, D.C. a couple months ago here. You were there for a specific issue. You've been helping on the kind of on the ground fight to protect the water in Northern California, where there is a lot of cattle ranching and farming. I've covered this before. Dad, you and I need to do a long episode on the Powder Valley dams here soon and kind of go over some of these big issues, but you were there to advocate for water for Northern California and protecting these dams. Secretary Rollins has been very receptive to that, and she included you both in her roundtable announcing an initiative to end lawfare against producers in the United States, which is part of the reason why so many ranchers and farmers are going out of business. So tell me a little bit about that. We have a few minutes. Tell me about being in DC with all of these producers. A lot of them were stories we've covered here on One. Some of them were stories we've broken here on One. So that was really exciting that they've received attention from the most powerful administration on earth. They're getting heard. It does seem like no matter what your political persuasion is, ranchers and farmers do have a seat at the table in DC right now and with this administration, which is super encouraging. What was it like to be there for that moment? What was your experience like? Maybe Grace, you want to start?
Yeah. Well, for me, it was my first time in DC, so it was pretty cool to go to some of those events, especially the USDA building, and be part of that roundtable. Everyone there was just so down to earth and wonderful. And, they don't want to be there. They want to be on their ranches doing what they love doing, but they had to be there because of all this lawfare that's been coming down for so long. So that was just really neat to be with so many like-minded people and to just have our voices heard and be part of that was awesome.
Yeah, it was almost like a family reunion a little bit. I'd never met uh, any of those people before, but it felt like family. The Mods and the Henrys and the Kings and Shad and all those guys. It was just AJ. It was just really super to be with them. It was really remarkable to really be with Secretary Rollins, and I think everyone there was just very appreciative, and I have a lot of respect for her, and admiration for what she's doing. Your character is shown when you're given power, and what is she doing with the power that she has, and ultimately Trump. Trump has chosen her, right? This is the Trump administration, not separate at all, together, right? But what has she done? She has listened to the people that have no voice, and these little isolated people who are persecuted by an incredibly powerful federal government who has unlimited resources, unlimited lawyers on the bench, and these people are just simply trying to make a living, trying to pay their taxes. So I just really appreciate her so much, and the others that were there. It was just a wonderful opportunity to see, I think, our government working how it should, right? For we the people. So we're just very, very blessed to be a part of that and get to witness that.
That was the coolest part for sure. Just like, oh yeah, this is what it's supposed to be like. Hearing from the average person Every rancher should be welcome at that table. And it's crazy that a lot of what you were a part of, Dad, was a first.
It was wild. It felt like you had to pinch yourself that we had ranchers who were real ranchers, real producers, boots on the ground, so to speak, in DC being heard by the most powerful folks in our government. It did feel like a departure, but it really shouldn't. We should be listening to them. And that, when I listened to Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s commentary, I can understand why that would grate on some people just because it sounds it's easy to say. It's easy to say, just keep more cattle. Don't sell. We need a bigger cattle herd. But the redeeming factor is this administration is doing a lot to try to make conditions better for farmers and ranchers. They're not just sending down orders and telling you what we need to do as a country, especially to an industry that has been ignored and abused for a long time. They're putting their money where their mouth is. They're paying attention to these cases. They're making examples out of these individual cases like the Mauds, the Kings, the Henrys, to show that one rancher being lost is too many. One rancher being lost to lawfare is a problem that this administration wants to tackle. So always got to keep an open mind and keep government accountable. But so far, I've been really happy with what they're doing and the approach they're taking to these issues. It's not a small thing to keep a country of 300 million people fed. So it's a lot to balance and a lot to juggle. And in previous administrations, the ag secretary has typically focused only on major players. It's very unusual for people who may not have paid attention in the past. It's very, very unusual to listen to very small farmers and ranchers on a consistent basis, to dedicate resources and time and the ag secretary's travel to address these individual families experiencing government overreach or weaponization or overregulation. To me, that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, for sure. And, Bobby Kennedy, he was asked a question, and I think the initial reaction by some producers is, well, like, that's simplistic. But and it is somewhat. He probably would have phrased it better, but he's for us. He's for the beef industry. He's rooting for us. He wants us to grow. And, making these nutritional changes and things that they're doing with the SNAP program, they're trying to increase beef demand. And so in accordance, we do need to increase beef supply. There's the opportunity to increase beef supply to grow the whole beef industry. So that's a very positive thing. It's, so I totally understand what he's saying. I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's good perspective. That's a really good point. Okay, well, I think we've covered that. Anything else to add on RFK's comments or how producers can kind of think through some of this advice? Anything that I left out that we should talk about?
Well, not really. Like I say, I think you need to see it forward, right? And you need to be able to change things. It needs to be interactive. And once you do that, so like you said, you mentioned the video, we can show in 5 to 10 minutes how to do this. That's the type of thing and analysis you need to have, because there's obviously going to be impacts on your cash flow, in the early years. You need to understand how that's going to impact your business. You're going to need to understand, am I in a better situation to purchase those heifers, or should I be raising them? Or should I do it all at once and just buy cows right now? Even if I have to take out a loan or finance this in one way or another, or even if I have to further develop my resources by taking out another lease or by improving my pasture management so I can increase my carrying capacity. All these different things you need to be able to test out, and that's kind of what the program does. It's a sandbox to test out these ideas and see which is best.
So if you're a Ranch Vision user, this video will be really helpful for you. You can always join our monthly consulting calls. Grace and I are on a lot of them, and Dr. Brazil is always on them, just to see some of these concepts worked out. Ask any questions that you want to if you want to see how this works. There is a report that shows you the cost in dollars and cents of retaining a heifer on your own operation using all of the methods that you're using right now. So you can kind of compare that to market prices and see whether increasing your breeding herd by retaining or by buying is more financially efficient. And of course, your cattle breeding herd forecast. A lot of ranchers don't even know in 5 years how big is my cattle breeding herd going to be, surprisingly, because there's a lot that goes into this. So that breeding herd report is very helpful to see where your herd is headed with the amount that you're retaining, selling, or buying, and what you're trending to have on your operation in the next 5 years. So, okay, we want to end, Dad. Grace and I were talking before this on 2 questions for you. We're going to end our time with Dr. Brazil on 2 questions. So, number one is going to be a myth that we debunk, which I think we did today. We talked about Harris Ranch. I get that a lot. I actually just spoke with someone about Harris Ranch. They said, oh, it's so much better to buy cattle that live on grass as opposed to whatever's going on at that, that place off I-5. That seems terrible. That was good that we talked about what is the feedlot and are the cattle there suffering, and does that mean that they never lived on grass? Nope. They probably spent most of their life on grass. Anything else to add on that?
Well, they generally get pretty good medical, veterinary care. I know at Harris Ranch, for one, there's several vets that's their whole life is just there overseeing those cattle, working those cattle, riding through those cattle, pulling them out if anyone gets sick, and treating them, pulling them away for a while. So pretty good care.
Probably get better health care than the vet's kids do if I'm gonna judge off it. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Yes, yes. You guys never got any medical care. Something from the back of the truck.
But we got free stitches all the time.
That's true. What am I complaining about? Yeah.
Little
Didn't even have to go to the ER.
Ivermectin once or twice.
Yeah. Long before it was trending. All right. And then our second topic is, everybody knows ranch vets, large animal vets have the best stories. So we want to end every episode with a ranch vet story. So I'm gonna put you on the spot, but can you tell us some of your lore, as the kids say?
Well, okay. Well, just off the cuff, I do remember one time, went out, it was just getting dark. It was middle of winter. There was a steer, and they had thrown out a bunch of apples, and this steer had swallowed an apple, and they didn't have a squeeze chute at all or any way to work this steer. So we roped this steer, cross tied him between a couple trees, and he could still move a bit, right? And I'm there because it's getting dark, and I put my hand down this this steer's throat, all the way down to try to grab this apple. And you're trying to grab the back end of an apple, it's just stuck right in his esophagus, right there. It's just slippery and slimy, and trying to pull it and get my fingernails on it. And it was hard. And I'm trying not to get, my arm in between his jaws and, get
elite apple bobbing here.
Yes. And
boss level apple bobbing.
Yes. And he's gasping for breath, right? Every breath is a and anyway, so I don't want him to pass out and die. And I'm reaching.
Bad for business.
What's that?
Bad for business.
Yes, bad for business. I don't know. It filled our freezer a time or two, so there's that. But anyway, finally got that apple, pulled it out, and I threw it down. I turned around. We let the steer go. He walked right over and swallowed that apple again and got it stuck. So there's that.
There's like a biblical lesson in there somewhere, I think.
Yes. The moral of the story is keep that apple in your pocket.
Don't cast your apples before steers or something like that.
Yes. Yes. Throw those apples a long ways.
I've actually never heard that one. Wow. So how hard was it to get out the second time? Or was that one of the freezer fillers?
Yeah, it was just as hard.
Now the real question, did you charge twice as much, or is it just one?
No.
Yeah, it was the second one pro bono since you threw the apple.
It was my stupidity for throwing the apple on the ground.
Man, all right. That's
a good one. Apple a day keeps the vet away isn't true. Just for the doctor.
The literal opposite. This is going to be great, Grace. We're going to hear all the stories that he hasn't told us yet.
I know. And we get to pretend to act surprised on the ones we've heard before.
Exactly.
Which are most of them, probably. Like my jokes, right? You've heard all those.
All right, guys. Well, thank you for listening. Hopefully you learned something about the beef industry and the news. We're sponsored by Ranch Vision. Come talk to us. If you are a rancher, you want to learn how to grow your profit, we're a community and a software that helps you manage for the future. www.ranchvision.io. If you have a vet question, send it in. If you have a topic you want us to cover, let us know. All right. Until next time, thanks for listening.
Bye-bye.